Hello, good evening. Welcome to the BBC News at 5. I'm Jane Hill. As President Trump's National Security Council meets to discuss possible military action in Syria, Theresa May is chairing an emergency cabinet meeting to discuss joining a US-led military strike. It's in response to the apparent chemical attack in Douma at the weekend, suspected to have been carried out by the Assad regime. The Prime Minister is said to be ready to commit UK forces to action without Parliament's prior approval. John Donnison has the latest.
The might of America's military. This naval strike force now en route for the Middle East. The White House says a final decision on military action in Syria has not yet been taken, but all options are on the table.
We're looking very, very seriously, very closely at that whole situation, and we'll see what happens, folks. We'll see what happens. It's too bad that the world puts us in a position like that.
In Syria itself, there were chants in praise of Russia from supporters of the government, celebrating the defeat of rebel fighters in Douma in eastern Ghouta. It's a major victory for President Assad, who is backed by Russia and Iran. But the methods the regime used to win here have caused revulsion. The World Health Organization says hundreds were affected by the chemical attack last weekend. Dozens were killed. Today, the French president said he was certain who did it.
We have proof that last week, nearly 10 days ago now, that chemical weapons were used, at least chlorine, and that they were used by Bashar al-Assad's regime.
Syria, though, continues to deny involvement.
Nobody in this community demanded an investigation of the situation or raised any doubts about the footage showing children and adults pouring water on themselves, allegedly demonstrating the use of chemical weapons. This information was just taken at face value.
But Britain, France and the US believe Syria is lying. They're now coordinating what to do next. The US already has a destroyer in the region, the USS Donald Cook, armed with more than 50 Tomahawk cruise missiles. Britain has Tornado fighters and Typhoon jets stationed in Cyprus. The HMS Duncan, another destroyer, is already on a routine deployment in the Mediterranean and could participate.
Are you convinced of the case for military action?
The Cabinet, which met this afternoon, has a difficult decision to make.
It's a very, very delicate circumstance, and we've got to make this judgment on very careful, very deliberate, very well thought through basis, knowing exactly what we're trying to achieve and exactly how strong the evidence is.
And Jeremy Corbyn is again warning of the dangers of military action.
More bombing, more killing, more war will not save life, will just take more lives and spawn the war elsewhere.
7 years of war in Syria and its many layers of conflict have caused catastrophic damage. There are no good options for Western involvement, and the stakes are very high. John Donnison, BBC News.
Well, let's go first to Downing Street, where our chief political correspondent Vicky Young is, because that cabinet meeting, Vicky, seems still going on.
Yeah, it's been more than an hour and a half. Senior ministers gathering here, of course, to make one of the most difficult decisions that there is to make. Now, I think the things they will be mulling over will be about whether they feel they need to get the support of Parliament. The indications are at the moment that Theresa May doesn't think she has to do that. Legally, she doesn't have to do that. It has become a bit of a convention, but on this occasion, it doesn't look that likely. They will also, though, I think, be looking at the wider strategy here. They will want to know what they're getting into. David Davis said that very clearly there. He's interesting because he is as an MP 5 years ago voted against the idea of military action against the Assad regime. He says he's changed his mind, but he wants to know that they're clear about the evidence of who carried out that chemical attack, but also to know that it is well thought through, that they know what they're trying to achieve. And I think, you know, the reason for that is so many MPs here in Westminster, they've lived through Iraq, they've lived through Libya. They want to know that there is a plan, a wider strategy. They want to be clear about that before they make any decisions. But at the moment, it feels like we are moving towards a situation where there will be some kind of military action and that Britain will be involved.
All right, Vicky, for now, thank you very much. I know you'll keep us up to date. That meeting's still going on. And I'm going to be talking to a very senior Conservative about all of that, actually, in a few minutes. But first, let's just assess the situation in Washington as well. And our correspondent, Barbara Plett-Usher, is there. And I think President Trump has been speaking just in the last hour or so. Bring us right up to date, Barbara.
Yes, that's right. He said he's going to be meeting with his national security officials shortly. He said we'll see what happens, which is sort of non-committal, but he thought that a decision could be taken fairly soon. We've also had the Secretary of Defense, General Mattis, giving testimony at a committee here on Capitol Hill. He's been quite cautious. He has said, for example, that he's convinced a chemical weapons attack did take place, but he said, I cannot say that we have evidence despite social media statements, which is, I think, a polite way of referring to Donald Trump's tweets, which have been quite gung-ho about a military response. He said that he wants international inspectors on the ground, but the longer that's delayed, the less evidence there will be. But he's hoping that inspectors from the chemical watchdog, the OPCW, will get there within the week. He did not reveal any information about the military planning, but he said his main concerns would be possible civilian casualties, but also escalating, that this might escalate things out of control, which I think was a reference to the possible confrontation with Russia if strikes are launched. He did also say that a decision had not been taken yet, but he said he would keep Congress in the loop when it is, although he didn't confirm that he would alert Congress ahead of time. And we do understand that he will be leaving for the White House to have this meeting with the president and other national security officials.